You are watching Access LaPorte County Channel 97. Coming up next is the June 23rd meeting for the Michigan City Historic Preservation Commission Workshop. You can find more information for this meeting by visiting www.accesslaportecounty.org.
I guess what I'll say is I'm so glad everybody is here. We'll pick up this conversation. The whole point of getting together tonight a little early at 5 o'clock versus 6 was to kind of have a working session. I'll call it a workshop. We can call it whatever we need to. That we discussed at the last meeting. I thought it would be good to spend a little time about the 2025 work plan. And what does that mean? Well, as we've come to terms with Indiana Landmarks and gotten our contract stuff fixed and Deb's back at the table, which we're grateful for, as just part of the negotiations, I'll say, for lack of a better term, with Indiana Landmarks. One of the things that we talked about through their contracts, they had this great little table at the back of their contract that kind of, or this list of things. So basically these are the categories. This is the kind of services we're providing and what we intend to do. And I thought, well, let me take that and turn it into kind of a working table. And I did that because it helped me understand what Indiana Landmarks had been brought on to do, kind of what the intention was, and for me to ask questions on like, well, how far did we get? And where do you think we're going with some of these work items? And so I kind of used it as a guide for myself to help get some of those things taken care of. And I thought it was handy. And one of the things, and Deb, I'll let you, because it came about as a conversation with Deb, was one of the first things on the list was the 2025 work plan. And I said, did we ever get that far? And she said, no. But it probably would be, it's still very much worthwhile. And I thought it was a good continuation of some of the things that we had talked about, and this might be a good chance to catch up on whatever you'd like to talk about, including maybe current goings-ons and how do we work on compliance. That's not on the work plan list, but it's been on my mind. But then as part of that, this discussion for the next, we'll say 45 minutes, however long we go here, is to just make sure we're starting to talk about what's important to you, knowing that we've got about 6 months left of 2025. We've got our daily activities and the things that we talked about in April, about what we're trying to accomplish. But I thought we should maybe have a more specific conversation about it. And Deb and Indiana Landmarks thought that would probably be a good idea, so I thought it'd be a good way to kick off the meeting with Deb being back and everybody being able to say hello, and now that we have the full team. So that was the entire purpose. And I will say, those are my opening statements. I really want this to be whatever you would like it to be. I think the goals and the structure are pretty clear. This group it's a great group. I know what you guys were trying to accomplish. I think we talked about in April at the workshop, there was trying to also say, how do we become, I'm going to use the term legitimate in the sense of being taken seriously without it coming across that you're trying to be more demanding or difficult. It feels that way at times, I'm sure, and I know that means a lot, and I know that it means a lot to you. So we talked a lot about communication and the idea of having some kind of communication plan and a bunch of other things. So I just thought we would start here. And so I took the task list and the table, and I made some notes. And you can use these notes. We can start here. We can start wherever you like. We can start with generally what's on your mind, and I'll keep an eye on it and guide us through it if you want, and then we'll conclude and we'll go to our regularly scheduled meeting. So with that, I guess that's what I would start with, and the first thing is welcome back, Deb. We talked about a few things, and I'll say this. So I'm going to go through the list real quick to get everybody thinking, because I know how shy you all are. And then you can jump in and tell me what you think. But Deb, we had talked about one of the first things is, something that's always in Indiana Landmarks contract is kind of 2 workshops, one for commission members and then one that's more public. And so let's start there, because one of the we haven't done the internal workshop. At one point, we talked about making motions, et cetera, and then we ended up having the full workshop. And so we still have time for that internal workshop, which we can talk about, but I thought maybe it would be a good time to bring up the paint workshop. Do we want to go back to that? That was something that needed to be postponed. And I'm going to say reconsidered only in the sense that I want to be respectful of Indiana Landmarks. We heard a little bit about some of the things that they need to have happen to make these workshops, I'm going to say useful, worthwhile for their own expenditures. And I think that there's a different way of doing those workshops moving forward. So maybe we could start there. Do we want to reschedule the paint workshop, and what would it take to do that?
If we're going to have a public meeting like that, then we need some mechanism for promotion. What's the status of the city webpage? Do we have an Eventbrite account to promote it? I don't do Facebook, but other people would have Facebook and things like that, so we have to look at those kinds of things. So to what extent are we legitimate, as you say, that the city will be behind us to support it with the webpage and Eventbrite notices and bulletins and things?
Well, I don't think communication will be the challenge, but to your point, I think we can get there. We had the new city website was launched. We're working up, rather than hold it back, we're working on it as we go. I sent off an email this morning about the historic resource page for the website. So I think it'll be pretty easy. We'll have a lot more control. So I don't think getting the message out will be a problem. Now, the question is, who manages the Evite? Who manages the actual workshop itself? Getting an Evite page out, tracking how many people are going, et cetera. Now that I don't know. I think that's a shared responsibility, or is that something that Indiana Landmarks would do? Like, Deb, how do you guys do this elsewhere?
Well, prior to April, March, somewhere in there, everything went through our marketing department. And so they needed to have months worth of notice, and, we really like registering people ahead of time,
Yeah.
so that we know that our speaker isn't driving for 2 hours to talk to 3 people.
Right.
So, we think that's really important. It's not so much about collecting a registration fee as it is
Right.
getting people here. And sometimes if there is a small registration fee, that people show up better if they have some skin in the game. That's just been our past experience. But if we can at least get them to register. But this spring, Todd helped me create a Northern Regional Office Eventbrite page. So we don't have to go through marketing for smaller events like this. So we would be able to set that up ourselves on very short notice.
Okay.
So we don't have to get in the flow of everything that's happening in Indianapolis. So we would be able to set that up and do that. So we could promote that. And I would just say that if we're interested in the paint workshop, the guy who's doing that retired from full-time work with us June 1st. He's working part-time through the end of the year, and he said he's more than happy to do these workshops, but after December 31st, he's going to be hard to find.
Okay.
So we might want to get him while he's available, because he's really good.
Well, it sounds like, what's the thought of this group relative to the paint workshop in terms of content and kind of resurrecting what seemed like a good idea? We were on hold with some process things, now we're back.
I have a question. Do you think having a paint workshop would be relevant to a typical homeowner as opposed to contractors?
I think more relevant probably to the homeowner.
Okay.
Although it'd be good to get some contractors here, but there's so precious few painting contractors out there. They're hard to find.
Yeah.
A lot of interior, but not exterior.
Yeah.
And the thing of it is look how long we've been trying to get the realtors to tell the people buying homes in the historic district,
Yeah.
there are rules that they should follow.
Because I think there's such a fallback on vinyl siding being the answer, so we don't have to paint, and then even some of the other wood finishes come pre-finished, so it might just be a matter of touching up as opposed to like a full-scale paint job.
Right, there aren't a lot of full-scale paint jobs. There should be more,
Mhm.
definitely. But educating people on, how to do it well, because a lot of the paint jobs that I see coming off, I know good and well, they weren't scraped ahead of time, they weren't primed properly. People are not understanding the procedure of that.
So even if a homeowner could learn that, they would at least
Yes.
know how to talk to their contractor.
Yes, they would.
Okay.
Which I think would be really helpful. And for some of the buildings that are a little more elaborate, or some of the downtown ones, also talking a little bit about color schemes and what's appropriate for that period of building, and how to use color to really bring out the architectural features. That would be part of a talk that I think could be really useful.
It's not limited to historic district properties, so. the
Could be
general
anybody.
public could- if they're
Absolutely.
interested, yeah.
Yep.
Well, I like the idea of talking about the color schemes as well, because let's say you've got a non-contributing house that's gonna come in and they're just gonna do replacement siding. I mean, I'm gonna staff review that and say yes. But you still want it to be the right color.
Right.
That's, so that's what I, like, the response to folks has been like, okay, sounds great. Let's refer to the historic palette. So that at least, again, the visual is, hey, I'll call it sage, for lack of a better term. I can't remember what the one green was. It looked pretty good. It was like, okay, you're lined up there pretty well. How are you doing it? It's like, you know what? This is as good as it gets. This looks great. We don't want to hold it back. And I think there would be a lot of value to owners that way too. It's like, for folks that are going to even replace their siding, let's get a good color.
So make it more general, not just painting, but color coordination for
I think color
paint and
coord-
siding or something like that.
I think so, but I'll leave it to the experts. But I know that even with things like siding, I think we want to be encouraging and we want folks to know kind of where to go and what colors they can choose. Because at that point, it doesn't cost them any more money, but it makes everything look more congruent.
And then we're focusing on painting wood siding as opposed to the alternatives.
Right.
Which we're trying to discourage people
Right.
from.
Right. So I just think the scheme would help no matter what, and so it seems like it's still worthwhile. Does everybody agree? I mean, we're not voting.
How far ahead do you think we have to schedule this to make it?
I think we'd want to be talking to him before too long to get on his
That's
calendar.
what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So would we go ahead and try to use the Northwest Indiana Regional Office kind of construct?
Regional office.
Do this, give this a shot as our pilot?
Yeah.
And that would include the Evite?
Yeah.
Is that, okay,
Mhm.
so maybe,
We can
to
do
your
that.
point, Dan, we'd give this one a go and let's use it as our pilot, and then we can also use the occasion for checking out our, improved website and how we can do, get the information out better and see what kind of support we get for getting that information out better.
And I think the website should say must register ahead. Because some people, we had maybe one or two people that we had the workshop for before that showed up that day that didn't know they were supposed to let. And it was fine because we had enough, but if we wouldn't have had enough, it would have been canceled.
Right.
So.
Well, and we can get to the wording, so we can figure it out, and then we'll figure out the wording, and we'll give it a go, and if we need to change the wording, or there's a better way, then next time we'll do it differently, but at least we'll be able to try this and get it back on
Sure. Track.
track, and is there a cost?
Paul doesn't usually charge, so unless it's his mileage, it might be that. I'll double check.
You want to double check and
I
just
will
let
do
us
that.
know what else you might need?
Would he give
And
us,
then-
like a couple dates?
Yeah. Do you have, are you thinking September, October, November? Probably not December.
I was thinking
Painting
September.
season.
September, October.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a good idea.
School's
Okay.
back.
The weather's
people
not
are
bad,
done.
yeah.
Exactly.
Have
And
it-
then maybe also talking to him about how his presentation, like what are the things that he needs, and maybe be able to have this, this gathering somewhere of, not that this room isn't interesting, but that has to do with what we're talking, someone like Amy has a retail store, or, or something like that, that has, that is more appropriate, that, you're kind of living it as he's talking about it. And I think just giving people more information and enticing them a little bit more with it. With regards to the other people who do have businesses down there, and some people own the building, some people don't, but regardless, they do have influence on their landlords or whomever's owning the building, and making sure that we keep in mind the day, like the time of the day and the day of, so as many people could, participate.
We use Sherwin-Williams palette for a lot of that. Is there another company that's comparable?
Most of the quality paint has a historic palette, so Benjamin Moore, Behr,
Are there companies in town for that?
Yes.
I know Sherwin.
Yeah.
So we can contact those companies and see if they would sponsor the event. If we have an appropriate location, they could have a little booth with their color palettes and talk about their own paints, not just colors and doing the work, but the
Local
product itself.
research, yeah.
Maybe they can help fund the event.
okay.
The bad thing about downtown is there aren't that many places where you could hold something where you don't know for sure ahead of time how many people you're going to have. We were lucky enough last time that the fire department let us use the one on the boulevard, and they unlocked the door for us. We just locked it when we left. Anything we wanted was right there. I got coffee and we got treats, and it was one of the better ones that we had.
I think so.
But we've got to make sure that it's someplace where we're not going to bother a business.
Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was just
I know.
visualizing the atmosphere of the event rather than just the content of it.
Well, what's nice about them is they bring everything. We did the one on windows, and they brought windows to show people, bad ones, good ones, and if you had old ones, they'd come and pick them up because they restore them. So that was wonderful. Everybody seemed to
Yeah.
enjoy that, so I hope.
The library has a conference room that could
Yes,
be
they do.
available for,
Yes, if it's not taken, right?
I had talked to them, what were we going to do? Well, for the one that wound up
Yes.
at the fire
Yes.
department building.
They were already
They were already booked for like every Saturday that we were looking
Yeah.
at, but they did have a good spot, you're right.
yeah.
So if we do get dates, we need to grab one right away, so that if we can get the library, but they get booked really quick.
Well, if we get a short list, if we check with our expert and get a short, since this expert's also retiring out, we'll go that course, and, you want to check in with him, Deb, and just let's start
Yeah.
narrowing down the dates, and then
Yeah,
we'll find a
I'll
spot.
get a couple dates out of him and.
Yeah,
see
and
what
just
we can
circulate
come up
those, and then we'll just do this, and we'll
Yeah.
take an opportunity to put it back on the books and
Yes.
re-kick it and see where we go.
I do have a question. If for future workshops, do you ever do them where you just discuss what historic districts are, how they're beneficial, and just have somebody really speak to the importance of?
Yeah,
I think that would be really helpful.
That would
for
be a
Michigan
really
City
good
to understand, you're in the district, this is what benefits you by being in that district, and this is the
that would
importance
be
of it.
really helpful. I went and spoke to there was an Elston Grove group a
Mhm.
few years back. I don't know if they still meet or not, but
Yes.
met with them, and there were not lots of people there, but it was hugely informative. They had lots of questions,
Right.
and I think it was a great way to convey information. It would be great to get more people, or to do it in more locations, different times and different days, but that would be fabulous, yeah.
I'm all for it. On the new website right now, as the website comes out, I've taken the information about the 3 historic districts that you provided, and in terms of what are these districts, what are they based on? So we have those PDFs. They're embedded in the materials that you were given for tonight, but always also ask that those be posted to the website and linked, so that people, as part of that discussion we had in April, what is this? How do we get more robust information out to people without just throwing up words on the webpage, right?
Right.
Kind of tee it up and then allow them to click to go get more information. Like, well, why is Elston Grove a historic district? Why do I care about this? What does this mean to me? So all three of those will be posted. So that's part of what's going up on the website too, as part of that. Hey, here's what they are. Here's why they're relevant. And I think that'll hopefully be maybe that's a precursor to the discussion.
Do we have a mailing list of all the properties in the 3 historic districts?
Everything is available on Beacon.
I mean, if we get the mailing list,
Well, it depends on it depends on how you do a mailing list. So the answer is absolutely, based on Beacon, we can get parcel data. We have all of the parcels in the historic districts already identified. Shannon, will you make a note? I need to follow up with Tony on the GIS designations for all of them. I meant to do that before the meeting. So we have all that, and then it's a matter of, at any given time, what we could do is do a parcel scrub, and you do the parcel scrub, and you can scrub it by, first thing I do is owner occupied, and that scrub is basically is the mailing address for the tax bill the same as the property address, or is there a homestead exemption that tells me that it's owner occupied? And then from those addresses that don't match, then we assume that could be a potential renter. And so then you can decide whether, how you want to, we'll see how many are on there and how you want to notify. Because a lot of times when we're doing, when we do federal work, we always notify the owner and the occupant.
Oh,
And most of the time, if you read the regs, and I know you've read a million of them, Dan, in your years on Plan Commission and everything else, it'll say notification will go to the property owner. But we also may want to make sure that occupants know, because in the business district too, you can have, you have a lot of leasing that does a business property, and these folks are coming and leasing saying, well, I didn't know any of this. Well, now you know. So Dan, yes, it can be easily done at any point in time.
but I think take advantage of some of the vendors like Sherwin-Williams, that they could even pay for the mailing and put their little logo or something on there and say, hey, here's a paint workshop, you can come and find out about it, whatever, we write up. And we could get some money from the community that way.
Maybe. So what we'll do is we can do, let's have, once I check in with Tony about the parcel, we'll have him do a mailing list for us of owner occupied and non-owner occupied. Can I talk tonight? And then we'll see what it looks like, Dan, and then we'll have a number. And then that'll, I think, give everybody a sense of, whoa, that's a lot of people, or oh, that's a whole lot of mailing list, I didn't realize. But then that'll give us a sense of cost for whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
If it's an individual, or it gives you at least an idea how many, I'll say households are in the districts, regardless of ownership.
And if we're talking about painting and colors, we should engage the paint companies that are local here.
Yeah.
Why not? Yeah, let's see.
Get them out here to our meeting, or get them involved in that workshop, have exhibits if they want, stuff like that.
Ace Hardware here is very thoughtful and very much a part of the community. I don't know what paint they're carrying these days. Is it Valspar?
I have no idea.
they did carry Bear, but I don't know if
They
they
did carry, and Von Tobel's carries Benjamin Moore.
Do they carry Benjamin Moore? So a couple ideas, but I'm happy to make some calls too and let people know we're doing this and try to get some interest. But I love the idea. I mean, it's in their best interest to sell
Right,
paint
exactly.
locally.
Yeah.
They know more about paint than I do. So we could brainstorm that. So I guess so we agree, we're going to give it a go. We're going to go back to it. It sounds like a good idea. We'll use this as an opportunity to kind of test some things. Number one, our new, being able to rely on the regional office and see what we can do. We'll get some dates from our paint expert, and then we'll start getting creative. Sounds good to everybody?
Sounds good to me.
And then in terms of whatever workshop you'd like to do with the commission members only, Deb, I guess I'll let you brainstorm that, or you can give that some thought, or has anybody got a topic?
What we're wanting to do, it just depends. I'm going through HPC 101 with a lot of my commissions now, because I've got a lot of them that change faces, but you guys have remained fairly steady, so I'm not sure that we need that one. We've also done a communications session the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions put together a communications workbook that's out there online that's just phenomenal about talking to all kinds of different groups of people, whether they're people in historic districts or elected officials or, you know, whatever this is, contractors, different, we need different voices for different groups.
Right.
And so
Okay.
talking about that, and we've done that, and it's really a large thing to cover, so we kind of broke it down. I did it most recently in Logansport, and I think we broke it down into like 3 sessions. So that way nobody's overwhelmed, but, you know, maybe 15, 20 minutes at a meeting, and then a couple of those. So that was helpful, I think, for them, because everyone struggles from the same thing. You know, the commissions get a bad image, or they don't even have the right image, because especially there, people are so confused with their historic society, and they think they're the same people, that they just have little tea parties and have a nice house they tour once in a while. And it's like, no, this is a body that makes decisions like the BZA. This is official. They're appointed by the mayor. And so getting that word out, and yet, you know, we want to help people, we want to direct change, but we're not out there stopping change. So getting some of those messages out are really important. So that's one that's been good lately, but I'm willing to chat about anything that you think.
Can we take 10 or 15 minutes at the beginning of a regular meeting
We could do it at the
that
beginning.
that applicants might be attending?
That's true. They
And that we're on,
would hear that.
you know, on a
That's-
live meeting, so then whoever's watching or listening,
Mm-hmm.
whether we have a legal presentation or historic, practical, or an economic presentation or architectural, different ways at the beginning of
Mm-hmm.
each meeting.
I think that's a good.
That's a good
Yeah,
idea.
we can do that. I mean, and so just take a look at the agenda and maybe add almost like an education item.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what do you think? General
Right.
information or
I think that's
education
great.
item, and that could be for everybody.
Yeah.
So no matter what it is, we could just build it in. I mean, it seems like the meetings are going, I mean, we haven't had a ton of applications, so maybe we will, but the meetings are going pretty well. We could just add that, Dan, and then we would always have it. And if we don't need it, then we just wouldn't use it. There's always something to talk about. We'll do that. We can do that starting with the next meeting, and then Deb, you can give some thought to that. But I really like the idea. I'll just say this: y'all said we talked a lot in April, and communication was a big part of that. We started talking about door hangers. And is that the right mechanism? Yes or no? But this idea to explain who you are, what you're trying to do, make sure people understand what they need to know. Why is this valuable? I think being able to hear that, Deb, through multiple viewpoints would be helpful for everybody. I think that would be time very well spent. Even over the summer, even if we do 15 minutes at a pop, however you want to handle it, I think that would be great for everybody. And then obviously it'll also be recorded. So if you can't make the meeting, Alco has recorded it, and you'll be able to see and hear just as if you were there.
I
Okay,
think that's
so
a great idea.
is that-
Going back to what you said, there are so many people that just rent in the historic district,
Yep.
and they have no clue. So we do need mailing to the owners.
Yeah.
Whether they want to do anything about it or not, that would be up to them, but we've got to let them know.
Yeah, it's a good practice. I mention it only because in my experience, I've had to think through both of those lenses, and I always think it's easier just to be comprehensive. Owner, occupant, we got you. That way everybody gets the same information, no matter who you are, what you're doing. You know, I think that would be good. So we'll work on that. So I like that idea. So we'll go ahead and add that to the agenda. Steve, Hale, there's no, we'll be working on our rules and procedures, but there's no reason we can't alter the agenda. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and add this, and that'd be okay? And then you guys, okay. So we'll do that. So that's time well spent. We can always add all kinds of stuff to it. So that will also help with our communication plan framework, which is later in my table. All right, I like it. So any other thoughts on that, Deb, before I move us forward? These were important, and so I think it was good to spend time on those and to get it back into gear. and and be thankful for Indiana Landmarks for taking the lead on this. And we appreciate the pain expert for as long as he's around. We'll take his
I
guidance.
think I can twist his arm a little
All
longer,
right.
but we can't 100% count on
Yeah, I
him
got
to the
you.
end of the
Okay. One of the things that was on the list that we kind of put limited action on, but I'm going to bring it up here because even if it's something that you want to think about for 2025, or maybe you want to think about for 2026, is other historic districts. I know that at the workshop, there was kind of talk about, hey, are we ever going to look anywhere else? Are we going to go anywhere else in the city? Do we have the time? Do we have the energy? Do we want to do that? Mid-century modern is very hot. For anybody who loves historic preservation, it's pretty hot. It has been. But I just wanted to mention that. How important is that to this group of folks?
Do we have a city historian?
Not to my knowledge.
We have a county historian.
Well,
There is. But I don't,
Bruce Johnson.
Bruce Johnson is.
but I'm not sure, if we had someone knowledgeable about city history, then even come to a commission workshop to tell us about the different subdivision developments and what's the history that might be appropriate for consideration of new districts.
I agree. I think that needs to be done before, just after, I don't know, it was within the last week, I saw on social media, someone in the city council blow us a little smoke, yeah. We're so difficult. I mean, I'm like, how is that, how are we difficult? Like, I don't get that. So we definitely are on a different page than what some of the city people, we're on a different page. So I
Well,
think.
they're probably hearing from their constituents,
Yes.
They're
Okay.
getting complaints.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Well,
they're not
so,
on
yeah.
our side. of it.
Right. So my point is, I feel like, let's take baby steps and before we start thinking about not per se making homeowners nervous, because sometimes historic districts make people nervous. They get, oh no, you're not going to take my, I want to be able to do whatever I want to my house kind of attitude. And so I feel like the people don't have a clear vision of what historic districts are, what are the benefits. And so I think we need to kind of hit that target out before we enter, those waters, because I don't feel like we're getting our the point of the historic commission. I don't think that's getting across. And to the other point, we have a historic society in Michigan City as well, and there's a lot of confusion with the two entities, and
So-
there shouldn't be.
So I hear you, and to piggyback off of that, I think, because me and Pat were talking about it the other day, I do think that if we had more historical districts in areas where the public is living, like a larger majority of the citizens do live, that it would help us get that recognition and that legitimacy of we are a historical district, or we are the commission, and not you have to follow what we say, but we are here, we have a presence. Because where I live in Eastport, I think that would be a great place to hold a historical district, or some type of, because I think it gives more, not, they don't be like the owners wouldn't be nervous to have the upkeep of their house. It would give them more incentive to want to do the upkeep, or
Right.
want to preserve that history and things like that. So I'm not opposed to it, and I'm not opposed to just doing the baby steps, but I do think it is a conversation that we should have about.
We talked about it before,
Yeah.
for getting new districts, so there's different levels and different
lot of-
sequences.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, that's something I think we really should get out there, is the opportunity to have what they call a phased historic district. So that's a 3-year process, and so for the first 3 years in that designated district, you will only review new construction, additions, demolitions, and moving, nothing else. And then at the end of 3 years, if there's not a majority that objects, it becomes a full-fledged district. If a majority objects, then it just stays like it is. So it at least does provide some control. Houses don't disappear. Nobody builds some really atrocious addition that just is
Doesn't belong.
egregious to the house. So you have a little bit of control, and sometimes that's more palatable to homeowners, and they kind of say, oh, well, this could work, you know. And
Especially if it's empty lots in the district for infill, the neighbors don't want something goofy
Right,
coming
right,
in.
that is a
So it'd be very
huge deal.
protective.
Yes.
Yeah, and we had talked about Eastport specifically because it's got a strong group of people that are very tied to that cultural segment of Michigan City. And those people really don't want people moving in and changing their neighborhoods.
Well, I can't blame them.
Right.
Who would? But let's think about this. It still has to be through the lens of what is eligible.
Right.
Exactly.
So we got a couple of things. So the idea of educating to understand what's the value. So I think we talked about that in terms of
Yeah.
the communication plan, and that needs to happen no matter what.
Right.
Because there is a lot of confusion or whatever. We'll work on that. I think we'll get there. So to not go too far before you get there makes sense. In the meantime, knowing that are there some neighborhoods that, maybe it's per the county historian, maybe there's another source to where we could tap to say, if you were coming out of nowhere and looking at integrity, cultural considerations, and historic preservation, what would be the top 3 neighborhoods that would pop up for you? And I say that as someone just that would come in and say, I don't know anything. I'm not, not Wendy, I'm not gonna come in here and tell you what you should designate. But do you think the county historian is somebody, or is there somebody like that we would tap into first to say, hey, we know what we have and we need to talk about it and get that information out there. But what are the other possibilities? We could at least incubate it in 2025.
I think certainly talking to Bruce Johnson, he's the county historian, he might know someone
Okay, that might be a good
locally.
start.
That would be a good starting
Okay.
point. The other person, only it might come with a bit of a price tag, would be Kurt Garner. He knows everything. He's done more National Register nominations than anyone in the United States.
Wow.
And he lives in Plymouth. And he was developing a preservation plan here for Michigan City, and then it was election time and it got lost in all the changes. And so he's really reviewed things in the area. He wrote all the National Register nominations for these 3 districts that we have and for other individual sites in town.
Okay.
So
Oh.
he knows the town like few people.
And then would it also be feasible or, I don't know, maybe necessary to involve community leaders who have been in these communities as well for some time, who've grown up here, raised their kids here, to give that cultural aspect of it?
I think there's always a time, I think you make time for that, sure.
Because there has to be buy-in from the
Yeah.
community,
Absolutely.
right? They have to.
Eastport is definitely, I just went through the leadership program, and there are so many committed homeowners and just the community loving their neighborhood. And with Walker Street, there's so many different things going on there. They have and they may have changed it. I think it's on Tuesdays now, but they have a monthly meeting themselves, for the association. They already have a lot of things that they've put in place themselves, and there are just a lot of people in that group that have the history, that could be that the liaison, but also would have the buy-in and would be able to talk with the younger people, if you say younger, about really being part of it. West Side as well. There's a lot of I think the only people that really were represented a lot was Elston Grove in this one leadership thing that I was just in, but there were just, it was spread out a lot. So I think that you could really find, you know, some really good people to talk about that and include them.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think always, I just think we probably want to narrow down what the possibility is relative to historic preservation, not just community development, but
Right.
there's a connection there.
Right.
And you'll want to bring all that connection together or find out more about what they care about. I mean, I don't know, there's lots of ways to look at districts and cultural landscapes. I'm going to get myself in trouble here, but
No, you won't.
there's lots of ways to look through the historic preservation lens, and it's been done in interesting ways. I even found out when I was talking with Deb and her boss Todd, I knew him from somewhere, and that was the I-69 project down in Bloomington. So I knew Todd Ziegler from somewhere. Interesting times, and you have to be thinking ahead about very interesting. So sometimes it's not all just buildings. It's the cultural landscape as well, and how does that feed in? And that's a part of the district too, which I just don't think most people think about. And maybe because we don't explain it, maybe because we don't come back and explain it. Maybe we need to explain it 50,000 times, and we will explain it 50,000 more times. So
And sometimes we assume.
sometimes we assume. You're exactly right. So
And this is on me, but I lived in Eastport all my life growing up. And so I went to school with lots of kids that now are old people like me. But I was at a class reunion 30 years ago, and the two gals were sitting at my table and we were talking, and they said, remember when we used to meet at Jean's Restaurant on the corner of Michigan Boulevard and Porter Street to pick up food from the back door? I said, yeah, we only got to order once a month. And I said, I never understood why you guys didn't go inside. They couldn't go inside because they were black. I didn't know that. I felt this tall. And I said, I am so sorry. I just assumed you were like me, picking it up for your parents, but no, they weren't. So we assume a lot of things
We
that
do.
we shouldn't.
No,
And I
fair.
was one of them, so, yeah.
So it sounds like the answer is we like the idea of continuing forward. Maybe we start with tapping into, and we know that there's a relationship between historic preservation, community development. Sometimes they're one and the same, even if there are, doesn't mean either one of them aren't important. And so maybe we start with, it sounds like the answer is yes, maybe 2025 we start with what is the art of the possible? What do we think we know? Maybe Chris Johnson would be, the county historian, would be a great person to,
Bruce.
can even,
Bruce Johnson.
Bruce?
Yeah. Chris is with the water department.
There's too many Johnsons. Got it. Bruce.
Yes.
I know too many Chris Johnsons too. So Bruce Johnson, the county historian, maybe to even just to come, it could be one of those 15 minutes at the meeting, but talk to us a little bit about the county and what do you, and with your looking through the historic lens as the county historian, what are some of the places that really pop up for you here in Michigan City that we need to be thinking about or that other people should be thinking about? And then maybe we can also speak with Kurt, if he would be willing, and maybe that would be another kind of informational sharing session that we could have in 2025. And then we can maybe from there, we'll start to have a short list of like, these few places keep coming up. Let's head over to Eastport and see what they have to say. Maybe let's gauge some other people and see what they have to say and just see what kind of rises so we can do a better plan in a more honed in plan in 2026.
That was actually part of what Kurt was proposing with his preservation plan that he was hoping to develop for the city, was starting out with meetings in neighborhoods and communities and talking in different areas, like what matters to you, what's important, what would you like to see saved, and gathering that information to help us develop a plan of, okay, what areas are we going to designate, what needs to be a full-fledged district, what needs to just be overseen, what's a local landmark, what matters to people, and how do we help preserve that.
Because if you don't engage them with what they want,
Exactly.
then they're going to feel like something's being imposed. on them.
Right.
That's the
them to be
key.
included.
Descriptions, how do we
Yeah.
help you?
Right.
Yes,
Well,
exactly.
we are, and I think what I'm hearing is I think all that will dovetail with larger planning efforts that we'll be doing on a comprehensive planning level. So I think that we would want to do those conversations at one time, but we don't want to wait to hear from Bruce. If Kurt had, Mr. Garner, you said? If he has a plan, I'd sure like to see it. Or if he proposed something, I would
I
just.
can send you the proposal. that-
I would love, I would just love to know what he was thinking, and let's see if we can just pick that up, and how do we think in a broader sense, and start these conversations without waiting, but maybe see how it all lines up with the broader planning work plan for 2025 and 2026.
Something
Right,
with,
yeah.
each one had a price tag.
Right, yeah, so it's a little more palatable.
Yeah, well, that's okay. Just always love to hear what people are thinking. I mean, he obviously knows what he's doing. I'd like to read it and absorb it myself, and let me see how I might be able to bring it all together with a larger planning effort.
Yeah.
So that sounds like something everybody wants to do. I think it's time well spent.
Oh,
It continues
I think so.
moving everybody along in a positive way. Okay. All right, so we'll do that. One of the things that Indiana Landmarks does, and I really appreciate it, is the grant, the facade grant program. And this is that, Larry, this kind of goes into a little conversation about partnering with other people.
Can I just step in a minute? I've been in this job almost 8 years and I have never done this.
You've never-
I know it's in the contract. I have never had anything to do with the facade grant.
No.
Okay,
So
so,
just saying.
but you have, even if you didn't know it. So Diana Sandlin, for example, all of the improvements to that building were part of the facade grant.
No.
Oh, yeah, the beauty
I know.
parlor. That's the
The
one I
what?
asked you.
Which
Yeah.
one?
The lady she came to our meeting, this is when you were out, she had the full packet. Remember she came and you had to scan it, she said that she had submitted it. She had submitted a full package with all kinds of improvements. Some were approved, some weren't. But what mattered to that, one of them was, I asked you the question about this because you denied it because of the sign, because of the wood that was going to be used or something.
For L,
L?
is it for L?
What
Is that
building are
what
we
you-
talking
L-
about?
Drive?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where L's?
On,
No, you're talking
I
about
think
one on the
Diane-
boulevard.
Yes.
Oh,
Oh.
okay, yeah. I was
My
gonna say, I
thoughts
don't know.
on-
Anyway, okay, so I mean, I'm happy to take this out, but I would say
I
that,
mean, I'm glad to do it. I'm just saying.
Whether you knew it was-
I've never reviewed it. I only review COAs. So.
Okay, but there are-
If part of what somebody's asking for requires a COA, then I've reviewed that. But as far as grant, I honestly don't know
All
what
right,
you
I'll
got or
reword
how it
this
works,
then.
so.
because those reviews have been done, and we can only approve the facade grant for those things that have been approved in the COA. So I guess maybe that's the confusion. So I'll work on that language, but I think this is important in terms of partnering. So we have the request in chatting with the RDC, which I've given to Skylar, and we'll get back to the group on that, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But my point is whether you may not have realized there was a facade grant associated with it, but there was, and there have been many. And this is where, so whether you knew it or not, maybe you don't need to, maybe it doesn't matter either way, but this is where this partnering comes in. If we want to improve businesses, the Redevelopment Commission does a rolling facade grant application that is a matching grant up to 50% for improvements to properties, business properties that lie within TIF districts. Some of those overlap within the historic district. So those are definitely things where they're already contributing, partnering up, but we want the folks who are doing the facade improvements, they need to comply with the historic district, and there have been several. And so maybe we just need to be more intentional about letting, like, if there's a review, to know why, although I don't know it matters, but maybe it would be helpful for you to know, maybe it wouldn't. But we have, in the case of Diana Sandlin, for example, she had an entire COA where there were like 8 things, and 5 of them were approved and 3 of them weren't. But she had a facade grant, so the question was, are we good to go with giving her the facade grant? And I had a hard time because I couldn't tell exactly what had been approved and not approved. So I worked it out, but I guess my point is, I still think it's positive, and we want the review on the business side, so whether you knew you were reviewing it for that reason or not, maybe we need to be more I need to be more thoughtful about how we communicate that out, or how we talk about that in terms of places where we're partnering and maybe we don't even know it.
I'm so confused.
Does that make sense? Does everybody know what the facade grant program is? Does that make, okay, sorry Deb, I didn't mean to throw you.
I'm not
But it
sure
really
how-
only affects owners, it doesn't affect businesses that don't own the building.
Right.
So
You can, no, wait a minute, say that again?
I can't do anything to my landlord's building. the
If you have
facade.
permission, of course you can. Lots of people get permission from the landlord.
If you want to pay for it.
I'm paying for a new, no, I'm not paying for a new awning. That's his, he owns that awning, I don't own it.
But a lot of people do though. A lot of people do. I mean, that's what a lot of these facade grants are for. Not all the work is done by the owner.
Tenant improvements.
Yeah, tenant improvements, sometimes you'll see those. Not always, but in the facade grant, yeah.
It might depend on how your lease is written,
Yeah.
you know.
And let's say, I mean, there's landlords, definitely, a lot of them in the historic districts are like, they just keep calling me and say, I got somebody who wants to rent it, tell them what they can do.
Oh,
And so, there is an interaction there. But we're requiring that we get proof that the landlord knows what's up.
Yeah, that's a good
That's
idea.
across the board is what I'm asking for, because how do I know, even if you come in and ask for a permit, how do I know that does your lease say this is okay? Like, we should talk. So there is more of that than not, but point well taken. So we usually talk about that in the facade grant too.
Gotcha.
Yeah. We learn something every day.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're willing to take it on and it's 50% reimbursable.
Yeah, no.
So-
But yeah, I get it.
So I guess I'm gonna say those, I'd like to keep it going, and no matter why, I think it's good, and I think that consultation is essential. And that's what I was getting at. And the business owners, sometimes the business improvements can be a lot, and being able to have you here and being able to give them good consultation on what works and doesn't work when there's an intersection of programs, I think is a good win-win. I bring that up because one of the things that's being recommended is that we do at least an informative workshop with the Urban Enterprise Association. The reason I bring that up is because they also have a grant program to do certain improvements. There is an overlap between the Urban Enterprise Association and the Historic District. That has not always gone well. Doesn't mean anybody was ill-intended, it just didn't maybe go as planned. So we can line things up maybe so at least our partners know like what our role is, what your role is, and what you're doing, and then they know what their role is, and we can have better success with stacking up funds and partnerships and things to help get the work done, so that, number one, it doesn't just sit undone, or it isn't done poorly.
everybody needs to take their name tag with them.
Yeah, take your name tag with you. I think the rest of this we already talked about. So, the only thing we didn't talk about was preservation legislation. So maybe we can explore that as we think about districts and we do our education internally about our districts. Does that make sense? I think we got to everything else. You can give us some thought. You can always send me your thoughts on the table. All good?
Thank
All right,
you.
see you next 30 minutes.